What started as a walkthrough at a vacant house turned into uncovering a literal trap house, a broken family, and over $200,000 in code enforcement violations. Somehow, we closed it, and here's how it all went down. So I was out checking another property in Port Charlotte, Florida. We were doing our typical walkthrough, getting pictures, assessing the condition of the property. A police officer pulled up. After talking a little bit, he actually mentioned that there was another property a couple miles down the road that had become a major nuisance for not only the code enforcement officers, but also law enforcement and the neighbors that lived around the house. He explained that the owner had passed away a couple years ago and he had had a caretaker. The caretaker, after he passed away, moved in a bunch of her friends who happened to be druggies and junkies and basically turned the house into a bona fide trap house. So they had accumulated a ton of garbage. They'd become a nuisance. Police officers were being called over there frequently. The house was a major eyesore. It was bringing the property values down. All of the neighbors were terrified and they didn't know what to do with it. And essentially they were at their wits' end. After we basically got this referral, we started digging. We found out that this particular owner had been associated with a lot of bad people. He had bad debts. Apparently he was an alcoholic. We had to do additional research to figure out who would be the rightful heirs to this property. In doing our research, putting together the genealogical family tree, we uncovered that he had 2 children that he was estranged from, both of which lived out of state. So now the real challenge was making contact with them. Didn't have success for a month or two. And eventually we were able to make contact. They had told us that they hadn't spoken to their dad in like 15 years. They didn't have a good relationship. They didn't want to be associated with him. And actually our sales team were the ones to inform them that their dad had passed. They had no idea because they hadn't spoken to him. So after some back and forth, we were able to actually negotiate a really good deal with them. We explained this property was going to need to go through probate. There were a bunch of squatters in the property, so we were going to need to essentially evict them. There was a ton of code enforcement violations, and the property needed a ton of rehab. After negotiating a great deal, we got it under contract, and the next step was actually resolving all the issues that I just mentioned. So the first hurdle that we had, the property was in a trust that was created 15 to 20 years prior. In order to make sure that the beneficiaries inherited it, we had to actually get the physical copy of the trust. But since it was drafted so long ago, that was going to be really difficult. We found the attorney that had drafted it, but he wasn't super forthcoming with us. But after deliberation back and forth with our title agency as well as our legal team, we were able to get those documents. And it was interesting because the property was owned by the deceased person's mom, and in that trust she laid him out as the successor trustee, and in the event that he passed away, it was to go to his kids, who we now had under contract. So at this point, all the puzzle pieces were together. We're on paper and we're looking good to move forward. The next piece of the puzzle was actually dealing with the squatters that were at the property. This had become a major drug den. These were bona fide junkies, exactly how you would picture them. So we had to do what's called an unlawful detainer, which is not an eviction, because an eviction, there's a legal tenant in place. An unlawful detainer is where somebody's just flat out trespassing. There's no paperwork or rental agreement. They're just kind of there. So the first step to that is you actually have to serve them. So middle of the day, we rode up. The squatters are all over the place. We just walked up and put the notice on the door. They didn't see us, so that was a nice interaction that didn't happen. But they basically had 30 days to answer that notice with the court and give their response. And if no response, then a actual removal at the property could occur. Unsurprisingly for everybody, they did not respond. Now it was the time to basically make sure they were removed. We had to be there. There was a SWAT team. They had full automatic assault rifles. It was exactly how you'd picture straight out of a movie. They basically kick in the door. They're going through, clearing all the rooms, making sure the house is completely vacant. Now that process was done. But we get inside the house and it was straight out of a horror movie. It looked as bad as you could honestly imagine. Trash everywhere. It didn't even really look like a house. It looked like an insane asylum. There was no plumbing. There was no electrical. So they were actually using the pool as a bathroom. So it was a giant toilet just filled with unimaginable horrors. They were digging trenches in the yard to just throw all the trash that was accumulating inside and burning it like literally beneath the ground. There's tents outside where other junkies are moving in, so pretty insane. But now we had to deal with code enforcement, and they were not very lenient. So basically we had to make sure that all of the trash was removed, boat was extracted, the lawn was cut, all the windows were replaced because the windows were all obviously smashed. And then on top of that, we had to completely rehab the pool cage and the netting that surrounded it. So we had to basically scramble at the last minute to find all these contractors and subs that could help us and just basic handymen to solve a lot of these issues. Fortunately, we were. So after that, back and forth with code enforcement, and we were able to talk down $200,000+ in liens to a very, very small amount. After months of legal work, cleanup, and negotiation, we finally closed on the property, but that's not the only one. At the end of closing on this property, we actually got the siblings to re-engage and be on speaking terms again after over a decade. Not only were we able to restore a property, we were also able to restore a family. This property took us 4, 5, 6 months of a lot of hard work, a lot of due diligence, a lot of digging, and a lot of front work, research and investigating. But when it was all said and done, we were able to work with our financing partners and make $76,000 on this deal. So a few lessons learned from this particular closing. Your next deal might not come from a marketing campaign. It might come from a conversation. Some of the best opportunities come from people actually working in the field, whether that's code enforcement, law enforcement, neighbors, whatever the case is. Build trust and share what you do. The next lesson is you need a team that's able to navigate title issues and legal chaos. This deal would have died really early if we didn't have the network and team of resources that we currently utilize. The next lesson is squatter removal is not a joke. This isn't just sending a notice. Sometimes it literally takes law enforcement and SWAT teams showing up with full riot gear to make sure you remove who's trespassing on a property. And finally, real estate is about people, not just property. This deal reconnected a broken family, and that's something that no after repair value calculation will show you. If you've got a property that seems impossible, or you know someone who does, reach out. We solve the unsolvable. And if you're in law enforcement or code enforcement, let's partner up. Like and subscribe for more.